Hello and welcome to this episode of What the Hype. Tonight we are discussing The Last of Us from HBO Season 2, Episode 3, which was called The Path, we later found out, and it's very exciting. But I am excited not just about the title of the episode. I'm excited because Chelsea has returned to discuss this episode with us. Hello, Chelsea.
Hello, Eric, and hello, everybody out there.
And for the first time on these episodes, we have the lovely Pam joining us. Pam, hello.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
It's
Hashtag
thrilling.
Protect Pam fame.
Yes. Hashtag protect Pam. Everyone's
I saw
doing a
someone
good job.
on TikTok commented, like, I don't care about Pam. And I was like, I don't care about you either. You're on the internet.
We're going to find that person and block them for sure.
No, it's fine.
But we know you've been wanting to get on to talk about this show that you've been catching up with and seen with. Please, we're going to take a minute now before we get to tonight's episode to talk to you about your feelings on the show, things that we've gotten to speak to ourselves with Laura, Chelsea, and me on. So really, if we can go broad here, Pam, what do you like about the show? And how is it different from the other post-apocalyptic, kind of zombie shows that you may be watching?
Yeah, so something that I should preface all of that with is that unlike the rest of you three, I never played the video game. I do have some background of it because my brothers are big gamers, and this is a game that I remember walking in on them playing a lot and just getting sucked into, the gameplay because it was so captivating as a game, which is why it then got the adaptation treatment. So I have very little background knowledge of what happens in the game, but I was familiar with the property before it got the green light. So it was really exciting to see something that I knew had a big fan base, get the green light finally. And I think that they had tried to make it a couple times before HBO finally picked it up. So everybody was pretty excited about that. But yeah, I'm pretty much going into this blind because at this point I feel like it's probably more beneficial for the purposes of this show if I don't know what's going on. So that might make for a fun dynamic for any of you that are listening, and also for my fellow cohorts on here. But yeah, it's funny because I'm not a big horror person, but I know that Laura is. So something like The Last of Us is definitely up her street. But I do really like apocalyptic zombie properties because I think that there is a lot of more of a psychological element and less a gore element to it. And that's something that I really appreciate about The Last of Us, that it's really less about the zombies and it's more about the human condition and what happens after. That really sets it apart from something like The Walking Dead, which starts off as more of a survival show, but the zombies are in every episode. In The Last of Us, sometimes you don't see any zombies. We didn't see any zombies this time, really, in this episode. And I think that that's fascinating, but I think that it does allow us to check in on the humans that are not necessarily they are trying to survive, but it's so interesting to see them in the encampment this season because they're not out in the wild. And except now they are because Ellie's left, right? But they've kind of been protected in this bubble. And that's something that you don't really see a lot with other zombie properties. A lot of times they focus on the road trip to try and find a cure or the road trip to try and find somewhere safe. And these people already have that. So it makes for a really different and compelling element for sure.
I agree. The focus on character and developing the characters has been a strength, and certainly coming off of tonight's episode, it was that time spent to build and showcase what each of our characters is feeling following the huge event of the last episode. Now, Pam, given that you had not played the game yourself, were you aware of what would be happening last week in advance, and or once you saw it, what was your reaction?
I know I was not aware. I was absolutely shocked, and it's so ballsy of a property to kill off one of its two main characters just like that, especially for them to do it right at the beginning of a season. I don't know if you all saw that coming based on the pacing. I knew that they had cast Caitlin Dever as Abby, and I knew that Abby was going to be a big person in this story, but I didn't expect her to come out guns blazing, basically, right from the start. Like that
It's
is
funny.
something that, like, I think that if you were not as brave as Craig Mason, you might have led up to it. You might have spent a whole season leading up to that, so you would get 2 seasons of Pedro Pascal, you know. But the fact that they just did it right at the beginning is insane.
Our season 2 kind of predictions look forward episode before the season even started airing, the large part of our focus between Eric, Laura, and I was, when are they going to kill Joel? Because it was like, well, in the game, it does happen around the point that it's happened in the season so far. And so we knew it was coming, but it's like, are they going to try and stretch out that Pedro Pascal star power? Like, are they going to try and get him to stay
Right.
like as face forward on the show as long as possible? And yeah, I'm glad that it was shocking to you. The phrase I feel like we keep using, because it's true, of this entire property and how they're adapting it, is bold storytelling. Because killing
really
off your main
bold.
character so early is such bold storytelling, and I'm so glad that that's what they're doing.
But see,
here.
that's a testament to the fact that they know that there's enough story to keep people watching, even if they have no context for like anything else that's coming.
Yeah.
The fact that they're so confident in the original IP and in the way that they're adapting that IP for television for people that maybe have no context for the game, kind of like I do, is like, I think that that's where, like, that's what the confidence kind of evokes.
Yeah, the game, I think, does not miss a step in taking you along, kind of, you're being tugged along kind of against your will into the story of The Last of Us 2 after Joel, his death. And there might be some elements of that in the show, but what I think is really bold is they did not, like, it would have been safer to spend more time, I think, in Jackson, or spend more time with Pedro. Like, I was actually team, like, Abby arrives in Jackson on episode 7 of this season. Like, I was very much like,
Yeah.
because there is ultimately enough story. The story of the game of The Last of Us 2 is nonlinear, and so there is content they could have used to fill the last couple episodes, maybe building up the world without our characters physically being there, but that wouldn't have been the bold choice. The bold choice is we're going to rip the Band-Aid off just like we did in the game, and we're going to make everyone sit with the choices that we, the writers, have made, and also, like, what you've just witnessed. And so, yeah, I think among all of us here, that's been the heaps of praise that we keep throwing at the show, is they continue to make really smart decisions.
And to that point, that would have been the mid-season finale moment, you know? Do that, take 2 weeks off, let everybody sit with it. And they were like, just kidding, we actually don't need to do that. And I don't think that, like, I think that they're right, because you still feel the loss. I like that they're letting Ellie sit with that, and they're really letting it breathe. There's that beautiful, not to get like too far ahead, but there's that really beautiful moment where she's in his room and she just breaks down because she's holding the sleeve of his jacket. And I just thought, like, what a heart-wrenching way to showcase grief, right? It's like you don't expect what's going to set you off, and the fact that for her it was just the jacket sleeve was lovely.
Based on what you've seen tonight and previously, like up till this point, since you don't know where the story is going, this is so exciting to ask you, where do you think this story is going? What do you think? What kind of story do you think that this season of the show, and or the show as a whole, is telling, based on what you've seen?
Well, it definitely feels like a revenge arc, but it's interesting because I really think that they've done a very good job of making sure that we understand that in some ways Abby and Ellie are kind of two sides of the same coin, and they're both kind of now inadvertently motivated by the same thing. And it seems to me like Abby doesn't realize that what she's done is she's kind of created a version of herself in Ellie by proxy of killing Joel. Obviously, Joel and Ellie are not blood related. I mean, they're basically the father-daughter duo, right? So it's interesting that she seeks revenge because her father was slain, but now she's left another daughter orphaned, for lack of a better word, and she's off on the same journey.
Yeah. And now I do want to talk about this episode. I mean, that's what we're ultimately here to do tonight. But Pam, what I'm really curious about is your opinion of Joel's death and Abby as a character, and like, is there justification? Like, I'm just curious about like your view on that whole situation, because I mean, we've established it's bold, but like, do you think it deserved it? Like, you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think that's tough, because I think that the knee jerk reaction would be to say that it's kind of a shitty move of her to do that after he saves her, because she almost dies before that even happens, right? But at the same time, you can't fault somebody for seeking revenge out of love. Like, revenge is not always the best answer, but it's hard to really pass judgment on her, because I don't really know very much about her other than the fact that her dad dies, and that's a traumatic incident. That's clearly the only parent she has left. I'd probably go crazy too. But that's like a byproduct too of being already existing in a world where the circumstances are extreme.
Right.
So the fact that that's her tipping point and she doesn't back off of what she's been seeking out to do this whole time since it happened, like, it makes sense. But it's hard to say if she's a good character or not.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I like that your knee-jerk reaction isn't just, I hate this character, because I mean, for a lot of dude bros on the internet, that is, or was, the reaction when the game first came out, was, I hate this character. They killed our precious Joel, who could do no wrong. And I mean, clearly the show is making it a very strong case that that is not the case, that Joel did something wrong and maybe doesn't necessarily tell us that he deserved what he had coming to him, but they explain to us that it shouldn't be a surprise to us that it did come for him.
And I think that he plays it that way. I think that as a show only viewer, I think that it reads that way even as he's doing that in the finale of season 1.
The camera doesn't even look at him.
He knows that there are consequences. And even as they're coming back to Jackson at the very, very end, he knows that what he's done is going to catch up with him.
I'm glad you got that, because that's 100% how I feel too. And I think it's like Mazin and Druckmann really like unlocked the key to telling harrowing stories in a way, because I think from early on, were calling this kind of a love story, but it's a story of how far we'll go for love and the different forms that love takes. The unconventional, the I will kill you because you killed somebody I loved kind of side of things. Turns out that's where we're spending more of our time than the more magnanimous or lofty, kind of places of love. But I would say the show has shown all types of love, but we continue to see the love that's rooted in the attachment that we have for others, and how that attachment is actually paining us continually and making us make choices for violence.
Found families are really strong.
Yeah.
Thing in the show too. I'm such a sucker for the found family trope, and I think we see that over and over again amongst many characters. They're kind of setting that up too with Ellie and Stina, right? Who goes with her? Yeah. So.
Yep. So with that said, and thank you for going down memory lane here and thinking about kind of how what the show has meant to you and your reactions to it. Let's get into episode 3, The Path. And one of the things that surprised me the most is the story beats the show just takes as much time as it needs in certain places. We saw that last season. I'm thinking of episode 3, also directed by the same director, Peter Hoare, who did Long, Long Time, the Bill and Frank episode last season, was handed this episode, which is mostly in Jackson and dealing with the character repercussions of Joel's death. And so even though we've got a little bit of a time jump, 3 months, that's kind of just enough time for enough of the characters to recover, only enough to then realistically launch some kind of counterattack or begin talking about what do we do in the aftermath of that occurring. And so it just made sense to me and was satisfying to watch kind of the immediate like aftermath, but then mostly the talking about and thinking about how our response to that action ultimately defines us as people, as a community, which the show is also hugely about.
We had speculated a lot going into this episode, like what exactly it was going to be, especially noting that Peter Hoare was returning as director. We thought, maybe we're going to get like an extended, like different, quote unquote, different kind of episode like we did with Bill and Frank last season, where we had that extended flashback episode. And maybe we'd get that with another character this time around. And I'm ultimately really glad that we didn't, because in watching this episode, I felt like it was exactly what I needed it to be, which was sort of a breath, a pause, an exhale, a moment to appropriately grieve and mourn Joel, to just sit in that grief. And then ultimately to move on, to give us the push toward the next big thing, but allowing this moment to be small in its overall scope to a certain extent, but big in the emotions that we're feeling and that the characters are obviously feeling with each other, and trying to figure out what comes in a post-infected raid on Jackson, a post-Joel being killed world.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, and also that they tapped the same director from season 1 episode 3, because I think that the intimacy is there, even though it's a very different kind of intimate. And so in that sense, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm ultimately really glad that there wasn't any Joel in this episode,
right,
outside of name. Like there were no, like we didn't get any flashbacks that we know are coming at some point in the season. There's no flashbacks. It would have been
such an easy choice to do that right away.
So easy, but they don't make the easy choices.
No, they don't make the easy choices.
They don't force Abby on us either. And I was really happy with that too, because
that would have been another, I would have expected them to do that. To your point about like the director, like this would have been a fine place to put a fishbowl episode in and try and plead the sympathy for Abby case for people that are not on that train, or maybe can't see the two sides to the argument. But
right.
I'm sure
and that was something we had speculated
to do that.
Yeah, that was something we had speculated would happen in this episode, but I'm glad we didn't.
Yeah, I agreed. And we do get some level of touch base with her crew, or one member of her crew, but it's at the very end.
Yeah.
It lets the audience know that we're not on a completely off tangent, that yes, that stuff is coming, but this episode wasn't about that. And similarly, like we still got some very new things in this episode outside of Jackson. We were introduced to not one, but two whole new kind of groups of people or communities. Obviously, Ellie and Dina do a lot of traveling, so there's that. But really, one of the things I think that this episode did so beautifully is in its subtlety. The many ways in which, let's take Ellie, for example, we're able to talk about this idea of revenge and avenging Joel, but she, throughout the episode, is able to rebrand the revenge as justice, right? And the various, I was not expecting a council meeting. That is kind of an evolution. It makes perfect sense in retrospect because of the people that we've been introduced to in the show, but that very much, Pam, there's not a moment where you have to push X to agree or disagree with the council, the rest of the council members, and that is not a thing. And so watching just the mental gymnastics and watching Ellie kind of, in failing to convince the council, ultimately having to psych herself up about what she was about to do or come up with more justifications, and how we reach for that, it's felt very human, but it's amazingly subtle work, because it's not just sort of this brash outrage tantrum that maybe we'd expect from Ellie.
Yeah, she seems so adult in the way that she presents her case, which is different for her. I think she knows how to play the game right. And I mean, like, it sucks that they vote against her justice plight, but it also makes sense because they're voting for the good of the many, right? And that's what it really comes down to, is that they see her plight as as a little bit selfish in the grand scheme of like where are our resources now? Like we're still rebuilding. How do we protect as many people as possible in the aftermath of everything that happened, in the aftermath of all the people that we lost, trying to protect what we've built.
Right. It's Jesse who tells her the night before that she needs to take some time to like sift away the anger from her argument to actually like get people to join in her side. And so that's when she comes with this whole justice versus revenge angle. Like obviously we as people who have come to know Ellie pretty intimately and knew Joel, revenge is like a big motivator for them, I think. And so
yeah, I'm just like, go right. Avenge your dad, of course. Like this makes so much sense.
But to twist it into justice, I love the look that Dina gives her as Ellie wraps her speech. And it made me wonder for a moment if she was impressed at like this complex conclusion that Ellie has come to, or if it was, and this is what I ultimately think it was, if it was her ability to say what she thinks people want to hear in order to win them over to her side. And like, this isn't about me. This isn't about Joel. This is about all of us. This is about justice. This is about me being there for you and you being there for me. And like it's a total community play, but we know that Ellie is not the community person.
Right. And I love that kind of like, she kind of hates that she has to do that. And it comes back around to kind of bite her in the ass a little bit when they're leaving. Because Seth is like, oh, I thought you meant it was about all of us, you know? And she's like so grumpy about it. But I thought that was such a good callback to like what, you know, it's like it almost worked a little too well because now she has to play nice with this guy she's still so mad at. So
yeah, like an unlikely ally in Seth.
Right, exactly.
The Seth thing is just so interesting because, again, you know, I think maybe one of the most interesting lines came from him this episode. He said, somebody shoots your brother and you're talking about unlocking our doors. Meaning that like the council refuses to sanction, you know, revenge and execution for Joel's killers. How safe are we? Are we going to like not retaliate and sit down? And then I think another council or another person in the town stresses the fear aspect. They'll be back. Right? They'll be back.
Yeah. That's actually a really great point. Is that it's is it showing strength in addition to serving justice?
Right.
Like,
and what's interesting,
part of me wants to say mercy, like showing mercy is the biggest strength. Who can show mercy? Somebody with power. But that's not even what my internal monologue necessarily wants to hear right now, because they just killed Joel. So I want to and that's the conundrum.
Right. What was really interesting to hold in the back of my head watching that council meeting scene and hearing everybody's arguments was knowing that they don't know why Joel was specifically targeted for this to happen. They think it a random act. He was happened upon in patrol and they did what they could because they wanted to attack. They wanted to send a warning, whatever. They don't know that this person was specifically sought after and was specifically killed for something that he specifically did to a specific person, right? Like there's this path that leads directly to Joel's death, and nobody in that room except for Ellie is aware of that path. And even at this point, I don't think Ellie is fully aware of the connection between Abby to Joel, and so she doesn't necessarily see it as a targeted action in the same way either. I don't think Dina was passed out for the whole explanation, so nobody knows.
Yeah, it's just so interesting pointing that out too, because if the townspeople did know, you know, what happened, frankly, like I think it's Joel had it coming. I mean, I think if they knew the full context, it doesn't say that the Abby crew is coming back at all. And so you don't have that element of fear. You don't have that element of we need to react and enforce, or it sets a bad precedent and we look weak. None of that is true. Abby and her crew came and did this thing. It was a horrible thing, but there's no reason to come back. The only thing that would bring Abby back to this town is if at some point everything, and truly everything, goes to hell on the West Coast and the only refuge for humanity is in Jackson, and one of the Salt Lake crew tells her, I know a place, remember that place, whatever. But there's no reason why she would come back, but the group doesn't know that. And so watching the ways in which people's fear is manipulated to cause an emotional response, but then also to see that emotional response mostly fail and do like the good of the group kind of thing. Like, I'm just so pleased that a group of a council is capable of acting in that, kind of needs of the greater good kind of way, because it's not how I as an individual, as a viewer, feel. And it's just shocking to see, now that Ellie has like vowed to acknowledge or agree with the council no matter what their decision is, because she wants to like kiss their ass and be like a well-behaved child. Like, now she has to kind of tuck her tail between her legs and still kind of find a way to break out.